Most church leaders believe that when something goes wrong, they just call a 911. But what many don't realize is what happens before first responders arrive often determines what the outcome will be. Today's conversation is about what churches must understand about emergency response before they ever need it. I want to welcome you to the Faith Secure podcast, where we are watchful, prayerful, and prepared. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Brown. Today's conversation is going to focus on something every church will face at some point, an emergency situation where seconds matter. I'm delighted that our guest today is Ms. Danielle Rhodes, a public safety executive with over 25 years experience in 9/11 operations, emergency management, firefighting, and pre-hospital care. She serves as both 9/11 director and emergency management director and has led multi-agency responses to complex emergencies and disasters. Today, she's going to help us understand what happens when churches call for help and how leaders can better be prepared before the moment ever comes. I want to welcome to the podcast, Ms. Danielle Rhodes. How are you, ma'am?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about this. Is my first podcast, so go easy on
no
me.
problem. Okay, we're going to have a good time. No problem. You ready to dive right in?
I am. Let's do it.
Okay. Our first segment, we're just going to take it to the basics. We're going to deal with what happens when the church calls 9/11. So the opening question I have for you, Danielle, is when a church calls 9/11 during an emergency, what is actually happening behind the scenes that most people don't see?
So that's a really good question. And I would have to say coordinated chaos is kind of the best way to describe what happens when anyone calls 911. You usually, you have people in a room that are coordinating with the caller, trying to get the information needed to give the information to the responders, while somebody else is usually dispatching those responders to the location. And as the call develops, as we're getting information, they're going to be updating those responders with information in the field. So big centers, little centers, my center that is a little center, we have 3 people on duty. I'm going to have one person on the phone taking the call, the other person's going to be dispatching the call, and then the third person is, kind of handling anything else going on in the room typically.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how it works. Bigger centers have dedicated call takers and dedicated dispatchers, and, they'll have the callers take the calls, and then you'll have the dispatchers giving it out. My center does both. So there is a chance that the dispatcher you're talking to is also dispatching the call. So it just depends on, what other calls we have going on in the room.
Okay.
How big the particular emergency is can definitely impact that as well. So it's all kinds of things that go on for a 911 call. But typically your basics is resource coordination is going on behind the scenes. Your dispatcher is going to ask you a lot of questions, and it does annoy people because they're just get somebody here. It doesn't delay response. That's probably one of the common misconceptions, is that the more questions we ask, we aren't relaying, we haven't dispatched anybody yet. And that's not typical. Typically, your dispatcher's asking you questions while they are communicating with the responders in the field. So we have our standard says we want to dispatch units within 1 minute of receiving the call. So within a minute, you should have people dispatched on the way to you.
Okay. All right. That's very interesting information. So you mentioned about the dispatchers asking questions. So what information is most critical for the dispatchers to get immediately?
The most critical information is going to be the address all day long. Even if we don't know what exactly is going on, if we have the address, we can send somebody to you and they can help us figure out what's going on. One of the biggest problems with businesses, they call it McDonald's. They call it, this is the Methodist Church, the First Baptist Church. A lot of the congregation members are going to know it as such, but they're not going to know the address. And that's important. Also, along with that, it's a church. It's a big building. Where are you in the church? How do I get there?
Absolutely.
What's the quickest way to get there from the main entrance? Is there a better way to go about it? Should I go to the back? Is that going to get me quicker access? So those are things that are very important during the initial part of the call.
Okay. So let me ask you this. What slows down the response more than people realize when they're calling 911?
Not having a location, having an incorrect address. A lot of times, if it's something where we need access to the building, let's say an alarm is going off, if we don't have key holder information, those things can stop or slow down response. And those are big things. So really the address is probably one of the biggest things. It's just knowing what the address is really half the battle. If there's somebody that, if we're going to need access to special parts of the building or even in the building at all, and that person is not on scene, we need to get that information for that person and try and get them en route as well.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. So now what is one thing every church leader should know about calling 911?
That we're really there to help you and not just ask you questions. There's a reason for the questions we're asking. And this is, just 911 is probably the most misunderstood part of public safety.
Yes.
We ask a lot of questions. There's a reason for it. Sometimes the responders want us to ask certain questions. So they're telling us, hey, dispatch, ask them this. And then we're turning around asking them questions. And they're, in the moment, they just want somebody to get there. And also that what seems like forever in time is really not that much. I've had people say, well, I've been on the phone with you for 20 minutes. No, it's been about 3.5. It just time is it's insane. And I get it. That's the most important thing. Emergencies are scary. We just want to get somebody help, but just understand that we are absolutely going to get you help. We're doing our best to get you the best help. And that's why we ask you the questions.
Absolutely. And that is a nice segue right into the next segment. I want to deal with the gap between calling for help and help arriving. So
Sure.
I'm going to ask you, what concerns you most about what happens in the time between someone calling 911 and first responders arriving on the scene?
Well, probably the greatest concern is how is the scene changing? How is it unfolding? Most of the time, if it's something major, we're going to try and keep you on the phone, but a lot of times we may not be able to. So if we're not on the phone with someone, we don't really have eyes into the scene.
Right.
So what's changing? Do we have new security issues we're not aware of? Is the person that we originally called for, have they left? Which way did they go? Were they in a vehicle? Were they on foot? Those are things to pay attention to if you are on scene calling something in or watching as a scene develops. The biggest concern for us is always going to be responder safety and the safety of our citizens. So those are going to be our priority questions. If something is happening that's going to possibly put our officers at risk, our responders at risk, or even our citizens at risk.
Okay. Now, let me ask you, how does a lack of preparation on the part of the entity that's calling play or show up during these moments?
It can absolutely hinder things if you don't have a coordinated plan in place for these things. It definitely shows with just the chaos on scene. You may have, instead of one person calling 911, if you have 10 people call 911, that is just slowing down. You're taking time away from the dispatcher trying to, do you have this church? Is this the same call? Are we dealing with the same thing? They're having to figure that out in the room. So it can definitely delay stuff if you're not coordinated in your reactivity to an emergency. It's always good to have, kind of someone to take charge and kind of make everybody settle down, because it does get everybody kind of hyped up. Any kind of emergency is going to get anybody that's not used to that sort of thing. They're going to get hyped up, and you're going to have all kinds of, chaos and people that are uncomfortable in the situation. And that definitely can pose some challenges for the responders when they get on scene.
Absolutely. Okay. And I'm going to keep flowing with that theme right there. What role should church staff or volunteers play during this time?
You're definitely going to want some leaders to step up and take control, and maybe, if let's say you have a medical situation, let's get the people who aren't involved or don't need to be, let's move everybody out of the area, so we don't have 70, 80 people gawking at someone, for lack of a better way to put it. and we don't have 70 or 80 people trying to tell us what's going on. It's better to kind of just isolate as much as you can that particular incident. But, a medical situation is going to be a lot different than if you have a suspicious person that walks into your church. Yeah. So it's really just dependent on what you have. And that's why plans are important, because you can actually put in your plan for the small emergencies and the big emergencies, and how your leadership, how your church is going and your congregation is going to handle those different types of emergencies.
Absolutely. So what mistakes create the most risk during the first few minutes during an emergency after calling 911?
Not having good information, or giving us the wrong information. Make sure that when you call, it's always better to have somebody who's right there with the situation calling. We don't want somebody who's, in 2 doors down in maybe the baby room or the Sunday school class that's downstairs. Right. We don't want them to call. We want somebody who's right there and can give us up-to-date information as it's happening. When you have something like a chest pain call, that can deteriorate very quickly from chest pain into cardiac arrest. And once it deteriorates into cardiac arrest, we're going to be, in some centers will give you medical directions on CPR and things to do for that patient. Right, so it's always good to have somebody there that's right with the patient and can give us the up-to-date information as it's happening.
Okay. So now I'm going to tap into your expert opinion here. If a church has no formal plan, which is very, very common.
It is.
In your expert opinion, what is the first thing they should put in place?
The first thing they need to put in place is roles and responsibilities. Yes. You need to sit down with everybody that when you're looking at creating a plan, you want to sit down with everybody that's involved and get their roles and responsibilities. Now, it doesn't mean that we want, Pastor John, he's going to be the one that calls 911 every time. Well, maybe Pastor John's sick one Sunday and he's not going to be there. So maybe we change it to titles and not people. So the pastor, whoever the pastor is going to be the one. So identify what you want, this person to do and that person to do in these situations, so that when it happens, people already know their roles. You shouldn't have people coming up and saying, okay, what do I need to do during the emergency? That's not the time to be trying to figure it out. You need to plan for it ahead of time. So I would say start with your roles and responsibilities and how you need people to respond inside the church, as well as, as we're calling responders to come handle the situation.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, I'm telling you, you're doing all the segues for me, Danielle. I appreciate it, because now we're going to deal with emergency planning for churches. Okay.
Yes.
And what I want to ask you is, of course, you've worked extensively in emergency management. So I'm going to ask you, what does a prepared organization look like compared to an unprepared one? And give me the synopsized version, because I'm sure you could expound. But just tell me the difference.
Well, I mean, it's important to realize that any emergency is going to cause chaos. And absolutely, whether you're prepared or unprepared, you're going to get through it. Time's going to go by one way or another. So ideally, we want, what I call coordinated or controlled chaos. Somebody who's a church or an organization that's prepared, that when they call you, they're going to have all the information. You can tell right away. They know the address. They're telling you exactly where the patient or the problem is. They're going to tell you, hey, you need to enter from this side of the building, not that side of the building, or downstairs. We're here. When you walk into the scene, you're going to have people that are designated to certain areas, and they're not wearing vests, or they're not necessarily titled or labeled, but you can tell that there's a presence there, and they're helping, maybe route people a different way, as, if members are kind of wandering around or don't know what's going on, they're, hey, we need you to go here. Or it's almost like a designated security team, making sure everybody's in their place. You can definitely tell when you walk into an organization if they have prepared and practiced these things. Yes. Unorganized is going to be, it's going to be people kind of not prepared, not having the all the information needed, and that's obvious. But I don't want to scare anybody. The responders will still be able to respond, and they will still be able to help in the situation. It's just you're talking about seconds. And while seconds don't seem much, they
Yes.
add up, but also seconds
Yes.
can be the difference between, a life or a death.
Okay. And that is very well said. I'm just curious on this. What are some of the most common planning gaps that you see when it comes to churches or any organization for that matter, doing emergency plans?
So I would say that one of the biggest gaps is everybody plans for the active shooters. Everybody plans for the big stuff. Somebody coming in, let's say taking a hostage, or maybe kidnapping a child. Those are the big things. And yes, active
Right.
shooter is important. Those things are important, and unfortunately they're prominent in our society. But we need to still plan for the little stuff. You need to plan for the medical emergencies. You need to plan for, maybe a suspicious person walking up on your property, not necessarily coming in causing a problem, but just enough to maybe raise your eyebrow a little bit. You need to plan for those little emergencies along with the big emergencies, because you're more likely to have the little stuff than you are the big stuff.
That's true.
So it's good to have the little stuff. Yes, have the little stuff planned for and taken care of.
Okay, so now, let's assume, they have a plan. Church got a plan. They're ready to go. How often should those plans be reviewed or exercised?
I would say exercised and reviewed once a year at minimum. The good thing about exercises is you can exercise, the medical emergency this time, and then maybe the active shooter next time, and maybe the fire the next time after that. So with emergencies, you can create exercises, and you can have it as often as you want. But at a minimum, I would say review your plan, and practice that plan at least once a year.
Okay, that makes sense. And I'm an advocate of that, coming from the corporate world and now dealing with houses of worship. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
So now we're going to bowl down your alley, Danielle. We're going to discuss coordination with public safety and community agencies. So I'm going to ask you, how should churches be thinking about their relationship with local public safety agencies before the emergency happens?
It's really good to have those relationships in place. You don't want to be meeting your sheriff or your police chief or your fire chief during an emergency. And public safety, they love coming out. They love, meeting people and doing those sorts of things. So, start your relationships now. Call them up, say, hey, can you come do a tour of our building? We'd like you to kind of have a lay of the land. Give them copies of the blueprints if you have them. 911 centers can put those into their systems, and then that helps the dispatcher kind of direct the responders to certain places within the church. So, you don't want, like I said, you don't want that to be the first time you're meeting those people. So invite them, for coffee, or a lot of times you can maybe do a collaborative effort, coffee with a cop, or invite the fire chief to kind of walk and give you kind of maybe some tips of how to maybe adjust some things or fix some things inside the church. We have a program here in Georgia that we rely on our state partners. They will come in and do like an assessment of your building and kind of go over security aspects. Some states have that capability. Reach out to those partners as well, because they can help. They can all come together and help you develop a good security plan, or just a plan for your church.
Okay, then that makes sense. The coordination is key. But let me ask you this. Say a church has never engaged with local public safety or emergency services. Where do they start?
You have to feed them.
Okay.
I'm just being funny.
No, Danielle, I'm going to speak to that, because I'm going to tell you, a lot of relationships are developed over breaking bread.
You're absolutely right. Well, a lot.
So,
and in public safety, there's no difference there.
Yes. So imagine if you want to start the relationship by inviting them to a potluck or something of that nature. Yes. That will break the ice. It's a relaxed atmosphere, and that's how relationships are developed. Actually, I know you were speaking in jest but that actually is not a bad idea. But I'll let you continue. But go ahead.
Yeah, so we joke that food is kind of the way to get them, and I do that when I have meetings. I've noticed a difference. If I'm telling them I'm going to feed them, I usually get a lot more participation. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's a good idea. Potluck, or just reaching out and saying, hey, we want to get to know who you are, see your faces, know what you look like. So if you do have to come, we can talk. Invite them to your events. If you're having Sunday brunch, or if you're having just whatever, invite those people there. Learn when they're doing like EMS week, law enforcement week, firefighter week, dispatcher week, and then reach out to those agencies, say, hey, we want to provide a meal for your staff for this day, or we would like to come and see you and give you some little bit of swag, or however you want to do it, and just reach out to them. We've had a lot of success with our churches in the 911, in my 911 center, through our telecommunicators week. We've had them come feed us for a day, or they'll come and drop off snacks. And now we know kind of they can see our operations, because we've had people walk in the door and be like, wow, I had no idea this is how it works. And that's good for us. Absolutely. It's good for them. So it's a good way to get to them, is just call them up or invite them to what you have going on, and or show up at their door. Either way, I think is appropriate.
All right. So now, Danielle, we're going to pivot. Okay. I'm going to test your mettle here. I'm going to give you a scenario. Okay. I'm going to see what you're made of, Danielle. I'm going to give you a scenario, and we're going to talk about the unprepared church emergency. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to give you the scenario, then give you a couple of follow-up questions. Okay. So here's the scenario. A church experiences a medical emergency, as you gave the example earlier, during a packed service. Multiple people call 911, but no one is clearly in charge. There's confusion about the location. Responders arrive with limited information, and valuable time is lost. So the first question is, what stands out to you immediately in that scenario?
We had too many people call. That's the first thing. Too many people call, probably with misinformation or not the correct information. So what ideally, from a 911 standpoint in that situation, I would the supervisor in the room would probably look to keep one person on the phone and just let the others know, hey, we have somebody, hopefully the person that's closest to the emergency. Hey, we have somebody else on the phone who's giving us information. Thank you for calling. And then just disconnecting with that person. If we're able to keep that person on the phone, obviously we're going to update the responders as they are arriving. But if not, the multiple people calling, the misinformation about what's going on, those are two things that are going to delay help all day long. It's good to have, even if you have to take a few seconds to get the address, if you have to take a few seconds to get more information, that's going to be better in the long run than calling and not having very much information or no information at all. It's hard for us. We can do it, but it does delay, response or where they need to go if we have to do some research on our own side. And ideally, you're going to know better than we are, because that's your church.
Right.
You go there every Sunday. There's churches in my county I've never stepped into, so I don't know anything about them. So that's a good way to make sure that you're saving time, even if it takes a couple seconds on the front end.
Okay, so let me ask you, what are 3 immediate steps a church could take in this scenario to prevent this scenario from happening?
Sure.
Or to mitigate it?
I think it comes down to make sure that your congregation is familiar with the building, familiar with common names of the building. They know the address. Make sure that you have roles and responsibilities identified. Like if we have an emergency, pastor is going to call 911, or the deacon, or whoever you want to designate in that role. And that way that eliminates multiple people calling. We want to make sure that they have access. If you have a first aid kit, an AED, where are those things at in the building? Make sure that your congregation's aware of that. And just make sure that everybody knows not to rush the person, or we don't want everybody right there, the best thing to do is to have one or two people that are in touch
Okay.
with responders. Let them call, let them handle it. And then, you can send a couple people out to direct responders if that's appropriate. And that gives some people some jobs to do, but definitely define your roles and responsibilities would be my top one. And the address, make sure everybody is, aware of the address second.
Okay, that makes sense. And in a scenario like this, as I said, I would tell churches who would probably think the chaos started with the emergency. And I tell them, no, it started with the lack of preparation, not the emergency.
That is correct.
The emergency just shined the light on it.
Yes.
Okay, so now we're going to go to the closing segment.
Yeah.
Yes. So we're going to go to the closing segment, Danielle. We're going to talk about going from just awareness to preparedness, okay,
sure.
Which is different, okay? So I'm going to give you a quick reflection question and then ask you a couple of follow-up questions. So
sure.
After everything we've discussed so far, what is the first step a church leader should take after listening to this conversation?
You need to sit down and figure out what your priorities are. What are the priorities? Okay. Do we want to, obviously, as an emergency manager, I'm always going to say you need to have a plan. But is that your priority? Okay. Is your priority that you want to develop your relationship with your local public safety department heads or leaders? Is that the priority first, and then a plan? Do you want to reach out to your state partners and see if they can bring someone in to walk you through how to write a plan? So sit down and figure out what your priorities are, make a list, and then just start working on your list. It's not going to, Rome wasn't built in a day. You're not going to get this overnight, but it is something that you have to focus on and do some thought, put some good thought into is what you want to see. Let's say your priority is, I want to reach out to my public safety partners by the end of, 3 months. We want to start building that relationship, and then maybe put a timeline on by the end of the year. I would like us to have our security plan in place or an emergency operations plan in place. So see what your priorities are and then start there and put timelines on them. Make sure that your goals are, what they call SMART goals, that you can attain them. Don't make it something that's unattainable, because then it won't happen.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So now let me ask you, what encouragement would you give to church leaders who haven't started yet?
Don't get overwhelmed. There are endless amounts of resources online. There's actually templates online that you can use. And the good thing about a template is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already there, and you can put in what you want to, take out what you want to, and develop the plan to your facility. Don't get overwhelmed. There are many resources, not just on the internet, but you have public safety partners. Your emergency manager in your county can help you with this. Reach out to them and ask them if they will come by and just walk you through it. I've sat with many church members and just kind of started them on a path, start here and here's this resource, here's that resource. Call me. I'll review your plan. I'll walk through it with you. If it's a security thing, you can call and see if somebody can do a security walkthrough, or call your fire department, let them do a, walkthrough for fire hazards and things of that nature. So don't get overwhelmed. It's going to seem like you're drinking from a fire hose, but if you if you can identify what your priorities are and just work at those, that's a good start. And then before you know it, your plan will just come together.
All right. And I just want to put a final takeaway out there based on everything that you said. And the theme from this is to let churches know, church leaders, that preparedness doesn't begin when you call 911. It begins long before the call is ever made.
Correct. Yes.
So, Ms. Rhodes, I want to thank you for joining the podcast. You did an outstanding job. You dropped plenty of nuggets for us. Okay, I appreciate it.
Yes.
So just stand by for 1 second. Oh, you're more than welcome. We've been blessed. Okay. So I want to thank Ms. Rhodes, but I also want to thank you, the viewers. And if you want more information on how your church can be better prepared, please go to mdbconsultingagency.com/faithsecure and connect with me there. Until the next episode, remember to be watchful, prayerful, and prepared. God bless.